Has another producer ever told you that there are rules to being a real producer? So, for example, you're not a real producer if you don't play at least one or two instruments, or you're not a real producer if you use loops. I started making beats when hardware was still the predominant method of beat making and production in general. And so people were shocked when they saw people using software for making beats, and even engineers were against digital mixing consoles to an extent. And actually I fell victim to the whole don't use Fruity Loops thing, because I was actually using Fruity Loops very early on, back when we used to call it Fruity Loops. I'm curious to know, leave a comment and let me know some of the weird "you're not a real producer if blank" statements you heard when you were coming up, or even that you're hearing now, because we're still hearing quite a few, because the producer community is full of toxic, miserable people. But I just happened upon this clip of producer Gail talking about her come up story and how there were all of these restrictions, not real restrictions obviously, because like Ninth Wonder didn't listen when people told him that software production wasn't real, but all of these artificial guidelines that were imposed onto her generation of production. And the craziest thing she said was that when she came up, she was, and this is like the early 2000s, so a little later than me, but still around the same time, honestly, she was hearing producers say, "You're not a real producer if you sample." And I feel like I was hearing the opposite. So this, I don't know. Let me know if you heard that, and maybe it depends on region. So does it like, if you are from a certain part of the country or maybe from another country, were the rules to being a real producer different? I don't know. Let me know what you think.
Do you remember when the rules of being a producer were so strict? You weren't a real producer if all you did was use loops and samples. If you didn't know how to make your own melodies, you weren't a real producer. If you had to go to YouTube to figure out something with your DAW or figure out how to do something, you weren't a real producer. You just figured it out yourself. Like, did y'all have to go through that boot camp too, or no? Because those were unwritten rules that you just knew back in the day.
I want to know, this is from producer Gail, I want to know what, especially you, Aaron, because you ran producer camps, and well, actually Dame too, you signed producers. Do you remember these rules or this part of the culture?
I definitely do. I remember when, if you produced on Fruity Loops, you were not a real producer. I remember if you learned something from YouTube, I will agree with that. Like, if you didn't learn it in a studio from somebody or like figure it out on your own, you weren't a real producer, because I felt like people thought you were stupid if you had to go to YouTube, which is so interesting and fascinating. I agree. If you could only make loops and you couldn't make melodies, I remember that being a huge thing with like old head producers. They're like, "Oh, young gun, you're not a real producer. You could probably assist somebody in a session, but you don't know how to make melodies. That means you can't make a whole song. You don't know how to do this. That means you don't know how to tune your 808. You don't know how to tune your subs." Like, that was a whole thing. So like, I don't know if that was just the way people gate kept things. I know, especially like being around a lot of my women friends who wanted to get into it, that was a way that a lot of men who knew women who were like hungry, trying to learn, they're like, "No, I mean, you should maybe try to be an A&R or go try to do whatever, go be an assistant. Like, it's too much of a learning curve." So I will say I remember this era personally. A lot of stuff like this was said, and I wasn't even a producer. I've heard things like this said consistently.
I just wouldn't worry about, like, to me, this even extends to whether you're an independent artist or not. Like, are you a producer? Are you independent? Like, who cares? Like, make the music that you want to make, build the community you want to build, because now, with AI, all you have to do is prompt, or you're going to have that conversation. Like, are you a producer if you're only a good prompter?
Well, no.
But at the end of the day, like, you can participate in these debates or not. Sometimes people are passionate and want to participate in the debates. Sometimes they're doing it just for fun or whatever. At the end of the day, like, I have my opinions on what it is, but if you're putting out music that's resonating with people and you're building your community, like, you're doing your thing. Like, who cares? Like, I never care. Like, of course, we rode the wave of like being independent. And then when we signed to Warner, like, some people said we weren't independent, but I don't care. Like, and only a very small percentage of your fan base is going to care. Just like a very small percentage of your fan base is going to care if you produced the thing and mixed and mastered it, and you were the one man band. Like, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It is the music resonating with people, and are you building a community? Like, so I tap out of a lot of these debates. I'm not a producer, and I have my opinion, but my opinion doesn't really matter if you're winning. Right. So
well, I don't think it's a debate. I think it's just her saying that this was a narrative that changed. Come on, dude. That's a narrative that changed.
About to get attacked again. Your back of your head. About
Different
to be
cat.
all mauled up.
Well, actually, this cat did fuck me up once. That's the cat that did the eye. But I was just confused because, correct me if I'm wrong, she said if you started making beats before 2010, the generation before you was saying you weren't real if you used samples. And I'm like, wait a minute. If you started in the early 2000s, kind of the height of that era was college dropout and late registration. I feel like sampling was, especially back when we had digging culture in the producer community. We really don't now. That's like a lost art. And I actually saw a No ID clip where he said Kanye West didn't give a fuck about digging. And I was like, that blew my mind, because I thought absolutely Kanye was digging, but I guess he wasn't. So that was such a strong bond between different generations.
Wait, Kanye West is digging? I don't even know what you're talking. Like, what is
my bad?
Like, digging
like
crates?
record collecting culture.
Gotcha.
So where, at one point, I think that was a huge thing way back, where it was like, you shouldn't be sampling the same stuff that everyone else is sampling. I guess breaks were kind of an exception, but if you could find new breaks and if you could find unique sounds and people were flipping stuff that wasn't typical, like anyone can grab a Diana Ross record, but are you grabbing like a rare French 60s movie soundtrack and flipping that? So that's the one thing that's where I was like, I don't remember that era. I remember the opposite. I remember people, real gritty hip hop producers were like, what is all that keyboard shit? What is that? So you're making your own melodies? No, you gotta chop samples. You gotta dig. You gotta do something rare. The drums gotta hit. Because there was an era where people didn't take like Manny Fresh beats seriously or Swiss Beats seriously, because they just sounded synthetic. And I remember that era. That was like when I was in high school, and that all died out. I mean, granted, it goes back to what Dame's saying. If it resonates with people who cares, I'm just more thinking in terms of the timeline of what I experienced, because every generation has its own kind of gatekeeping and hazing. I'm about to squeeze the shit out of this cat.
Payne, you're losing the fight here. Like, I don't know what the cat looks like, but you're definitely losing the fight with the cats.
Story of my life.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you should also just kind of think about like the brand you want to build for yourself, right? Because like Room and Board, like, we're not touching AI. We'll probably be vocal about that and let people know, like, hey, like, if we say that we're trying to like return to some of the energy from the late 90s, early 2000s. I mean, I guess you can do that with AI, but we want to do it authentically, and we want to give, producers and artists an opportunity to really display what they've been working on for the past 10 years or what they've put in their 10,000 hours for. So that's a whole different vibe than another collective might start to show off like what you can do with AI. Right? Like, it goes back to just your brand and the story that you're telling as well, and you just have to be in alignment with that. So yeah.
Yeah, and then the culture changes and you either go with it or against it. And I think both options work for people. Everyone's doing everything all at once. And so there's really no point. I mean, I think some gatekeeping, we've always said that, some gatekeeping is good. And some gatekeeping is just superfluous and it's just meant to boost certain people's egos. Like the FL Studio thing. Yeah. That tune changed pretty quickly.
Yeah. No, I'm super gatekeeping stuff at Room and Board for sure. Like, you know, I think it's necessary. I think it's necessary in a lot of different ways. I know Aaron's brought that up before. We need more gatekeepers.
Oh yeah.
So, but yeah. Anything else on this topic, Payne?
No, I mean, weigh in on if there are producers in the comment section. It might depend on the region too that you're in. Because if you were in the Midwest, it was more sampley. If you were on the East Coast, more sampley. If you're in the South, it was probably more of a hybrid model where it could go either way. I don't know.
I don't ever remember hearing that if you sampled, you weren't a producer. That sounds wild because like that's how did hip hop start? Like,
no, I hear that now. Because they're like everyone's a moron now. But back then in the early 2000s, that was, I'm not saying it was the height of sampling, but we're coming off of the golden era. There's the backpack era, you know, Kanye and Jay-Z and all that. Like people loved sample based beats during that era. Nowadays, our collective intelligence is down and all producers want to do is troll and be negative. So it makes sense. But back then, I don't think so.